Practice joy. That is what he said, over and over, in his soft voice, staring at his shoes. Practice joy. God was perfect joy. If God made the world, it had to be filled with his joy. People, being mortal and short-sighted, overlooked the joy and dwelt in suffering and confusion and sorrow, but the joy was still there. And misguided people could create misery, the opposite of joy. But the presence of misery only called for an even stronger outpouring of joy. If misery and joy were contending for supremacy in the world, then joy needed all the practitioners it could get. Practice joy. Practice makes perfect. If you practice joy, you will increase your capacity to find it, Brother Joy told his shoes. They were old hush puppies. There were golf shoes called Foot Joys. How badly I wanted to buy him a pair, but I didn't. He would have loved them. He had about 50 followers, calling themselves practitioners, each one of them seeming to me to be equally loony and gullible, including my poor mother. But at least I understood the source, me, of her problem. The others, these were people who had every reason to be unhappy, validly, I thought, but instead they were madly practicing joy. All of them were out there looking for that silver lining, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, thinking positive, believing against copious evidence to the contrary, that there was a little bit of good in everybody. On their own, they would do their best to practice joy, and when they came together in the storefront church, it was to bow their heads and share the joy. Suckers, I wanted to scream, doormats. Knowing that I would soon be under my own governance, and sensing that this would be her final opportunity to save my soul, my mother asked the Reverend Joy if he would personally take me under his wing and give me the great gift of being truly joyful. I overheard her tell him that she was afraid that I had become completely alienated. If that meant I felt like I belonged on another planet, she wasn't far from wrong. Everything I'd seen on this one had led to the same conclusion, that people were out for themselves, nothing else mattered, no matter what anyone said. In fact, if you heard anyone talking about sharing or sacrifice or, God forbid, love, you should run away as fast as possible, for certainly you were in the presence of a ruthless, calculating con artist who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted, relieving you of all you had. Brother Joy's scam, as scams went, seemed merely pathetic to me compared to some of the more sophisticated ministries I'd seen before. Melancholy as any 16-year-old boy could be, braced by Salinger, I was in no mood to become a practitioner of joy. He agreed, I heard him agree, to undertake this awesome responsibility, the salvation of my soul. I shuddered. No one could possibly be less of a father figure in my eyes. He was a boob, a jerk, a fool, a phony of the worst sort, an unsuccessful one, a loser. What was my mother doing? With all the highly polished grifters around to choose from, why pick this goof? And then I heard the terrible news, Brother Joy's plan for my redemption. The best way he knew to turn a boy around, to show him all the joy there was in life, he said to my hopeful mother, was to take him camping. Out to the bosom of nature, he said, away from all the noise and confusion, just the two of us. My mother thought this notion was heaven sent. I would have preferred a firing squad, but I was not consulted in this plot. The plans were made. I was going, we were, just the two of us. The bosom of nature awaited. How I dreaded the advent of that weekend. It was not what they called the fear of God, but it was close. Surely something would happen, a minor miracle would save me. I could get sick. He could get sick. An emergency somewhere, a small town in Argentina calling for an immediate infusion of joy that only Brother Joy could supply. But almost because it was so dreadful to contemplate, I knew it was not going to go away. This was my mother's last chance to save me. Our destination was the Great Smoky Mountains, from which, Brother Joy proudly declared, he hailed. It figured. Most people were just born. Brother Joy had been hailed. I could picture the hailing perfectly. My mother packed a bag for me, Brother Joy would supply all the camping necessities, the tent, sleeping bags, cooking utensils. We will eat like kings, he told me, laughing and rubbing his hands together. I can't wait. I noticed, with horror, that he had become like a different person. He was actually talking to me and looking at me, not his shoes. This camping trip was having a disturbing effect on him, disturbing to me. I could see the signs. He was going to be the father I'd never had. I was going to be the son he'd never had. We would find each other in the bosom of nature, not to mention the joy. It was all too hideous. And the moment came when we stepped into his car, an aging Ford Escort that seemed to sag visibly and wearily when his bulk compressed its springs. "Have fun, you two," my mother said, and she tried to smile, but she could not hide the worried look on her face, because we weren't really going camping. We were on a mission to save my soul. Brother Joy was beaming, pulsing, radiating joy. Maybe he felt that, like the moon, I might begin to shine by reflected glow. As we waved farewell to my mother and Mrs. Joy, he slapped my leg and told me what a great trip this was going to be. He was happier than I'd ever seen him, and that really scared me. His glasses were so cockeyed I didn't know if he could see to drive. His perkiness was completely at odds with my belief that this was a strictly penitential occasion I now had no choice but to endure. "Isn't this just great?" he said. Everything was great for him. The day was great, the weather was great, our prospects were great, the drive was going to be great, even our destination, those Smoky Mountains, were great. I soon discovered that the Reverend Joy's second favorite word was great. If the Smokies had not been great, we would have gone somewhere else that was, or at least grand. In the midst of his oozings, I must have made some reply, referring to him respectfully as Brother Joy, because he was waving the plump hand nearest to me and insisting that I call him BJ. We were, in his joyful eyes, buddies now, camping buddies. What was closeness to him seemed an unbridgeable gulf to me. BJ. He couldn't know it, but one of the teachers at my school was called BJ. It stood for blowjob. I wasn't exactly sure what blowjob meant, but I knew it was intended for ridicule. And here was Brother Joy asking me to call him BJ. I handled the situation the way I managed so many things at that time, by avoiding it. Whenever I spoke to him after that, I used no name at all. We had a 5-hour drive ahead of us, and not even BJ could summon up paeans to greatness for that long. He paused in his recitation of how wonderful everything was and would be, and the sounds of our travel took over, the whir of the wheels, the buffeting of the wind, the shakes and rattles of the battered Escort. The relative silence was peaceful for a while, but it soon grew to be ominous. I wondered what he could be thinking, and realized with a fearful shock that he was probably wondering what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking anything, of course not. When would he realize that and start coming after me? I had no defense. I could smell a heart-to-heart talk coming, and I didn't like it one bit. Then, amazingly, like a huge animal suddenly gone berserk, he sprang into song. At the top of his lungs, boom, boom, ain't it great to be crazy? Laughing and singing, red-faced, slapping the steering wheel, waving his arms around, repeating that line, changing the emphasis as if it made a difference, performing it operatically, stopping, laughing, adjusting his glasses to a new angle and starting again. Boom, boom. I slumped in my seat and had the distinct thought, could it get any worse than this? He segued into great big gobs of greasy, grimy gopher guts, and followed that with some ode to peanut butter and jelly that I'd never heard before. All of it was so achingly cornball that I couldn't look at the guy. I had to pretend he wasn't there. I wasn't there. None of this was happening. I was having a very bad dream. I fixed my gaze out the window as if I was absorbed by the fascinating roadside scenery. Save me. Somebody save me was all I could think. I made a deal in the car on that highway. I asked for deliverance. Okay, God, I said to whatever higher power that may have been listening, if you're out there, which I seriously doubt, but just in case, if you are listening, get me out of this, and I'll believe in you. I'll believe in you like nobody's ever believed in you before. I know other people have told you that so many times, but I'm a guy who really and truly means it. You get me out of this, and you've got a follower for life. My entire life will be a monument to my belief in if you will just get me out of this car and away from this lunatic. It was as simple as that. A direct appeal. Straight deal. No frills, no fine print. And that was as close to prayer as I had ever come in my life. I said it with the utmost fervor and sincerity, with humility and hope. But I did not say anything out loud, only kept my eyes riveted on trees, grass, and billboards. I thought if I did say something, Brother Joy would stop singing and start talking to me about those silver linings and pots of gold. We had at least 4 hours of driving left, and I couldn't take that. The singing I thought I could live through, laugh at, or ignore, although he immediately tested my resolve by zipping into a hideously upbeat version of I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, belting it out as if it was his anthem, his signature song. Was my plea heard? I don't know, but if it was, and God acted on it, then it is true what they say, that his ways are not ours, and he is unknowable. If his fingerprints were on what followed, then he is some kind of twisted prankster, a sovereign who, possibly out of boredom, occasionally turns his hand at practical jokes or terrible disasters, just to see what we will do.